So it's been a little over a week since we last saw each other, so I'm going to do a quick check-in before we go through the interest profile. So, how are you? That's good. Okay. So I want to briefly talk about what this activity is that I randomly gave you last week before I hand you over a copy. So what I had you do was the ONET Interest Profiler. This is based off the John Holland's Reisig theory. So the Reisig theory is a composition of six personality types. That is realistic, investigative, artistic, social, enterprising, and conventional. What happens is after completing this this questionnaire, based off of your wants, you'll receive a 2 to 3 code based off of your interest, right? So this code that you have is going to get compared to other professionals inside of careers that may have similar interest or different interests than you. So if you have a certain 3-letter code, it's going to match with other people who are other careers with people who have the same or similar codes, right? I want to briefly mention that this is purely for your consideration only. This is widely used. There is quite a bit of evidence that backs behind it. But at the same degree, we are humans, and I don't believe that humans can be properly defined inside of 2 to 3 letters. So just to give a preface, you don't have to use this by law. It's just for interest. Here is your copy, and then I'm going to go ahead and hold on to myself so I can show you bits of the information on here. What I'm going to do is go over your top 3, so your code, and go through them individually. And after that, we'll do a brief check-in, see how you feel about them, and then we're going to move on to what this actually means. So let's start off with what your code is. Your code is an ISC in that particular order. So that's investigative with 32, social with 31, and conventional with 28. I want to show this little bar graph just so we see it a little clearer. For investigative, you have an interest in, it's very like logic bound. You like to search for facts and figure out problems, so problem solving, searching for facts. You have a lot of like critical thinking. Your second highest, which is social, which means you have this interest in helping people learn and grow. So that may be taking in place of like a education role or even a helping role or service role. And finally, your third highest is conventional with a 28. You like to pay close attention to details and information. You like clear rules and guidelines and criteria. How do you feel about just those 3 being your highest? Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Yeah, that's fair. Again, this is just for consideration. We can go over some of those thoughts as well as we go on. So I want to go through a brief interpretation of the results. If you look at this chart, so the Reisig is actually lettered and organized in a way that the closer they are together, the more similar career interest fields you get. For example, if you have an RIA, you have a high consistency. Essentially, that means there are more jobs available with the RIA. The more space they are, shows a lower consistency. So in this case, you have an ISC. Therefore, you have a lower consistency when it comes to your results. That's not a bad thing. It means there are fewer jobs that meet all 3 of those criteria. You can also knock one of those letters out, whether it's the S or C, and it opens up more. But as for this, you just have a little lower amount of jobs that fit all 3 of those perfectly. Now, to continue on with this, we also have the differentiation, right? So I like to consider this almost as like your ability of satisfaction with your job compared to if you were to pick any other score. So essentially, because you have, this compares your scores amongst each other and also amongst the highest of the 3 themselves. So because your highest are 32, 31, and 28, you have and your lowest, are 13, 13, and 15, you're a very differentiated person. This just means that if you have a job that is ISC, you're likely to be more satisfied in an ISC based job than if you were to be inside of a RIA job. You may have your investigative needs fulfilled in that job, but because of that low interest in let's see, realistic and artistic. And because you have a job doing that, you may not feel as satisfied. You may feel bored, you may not feel challenged. So I want to briefly go over that before we go inside of congruency with your current career. How do you currently feel about those two? Gotcha, that's okay. So let's go through your congruency. We know that you have an interest in being a counselor, so getting your LPC license, that's where we're going right now. Eventually, we'll see what the doctoral path is, but for now, let's stick with the master's LPC. As a counselor, the counselor's interest scores are actually 2. It's just S and I. You actually meet that with your codes. You do have an I and an S, and they're also extremely high compared to the other codes. With the exception of conventional. So you do meet the criteria of a mental health counselor according to the Hollins Code. To go a little depth inside of this, with that investigative interest, you're more likely to pick something that is evidence-based. You may also pursue some type of psychoeducation as you are interacting with clients. Again, it's that very idea-based. So you may pick more CBT related or solution focused approaches when it comes to counseling. And then as for conventional, sort of, again, it's kind of that working with information and paying attention to details. You may be more inclined to do assessments or having a more structured approach when it comes to your clinical sessions. So again, this is very much similar to solution focus, maybe leaning towards diagnostics when it comes to interest. Finally, again, that social bit is a big part of being a counselor. You have to be helping people to be a counselor, and you greatly meet that criteria according to Hollins Code. I do have a few alternative career plans listed. Another one that we kind of briefly looked into based off of the assessments and based off your needs, including considerations to your hearing, is a genetic counselor. So it kind of meets a bit of that criteria of both helping people but also interpreting data, so those genetics. And also you're essentially educating future parents on what this information means, how that may play inside of their life. You're a big part of that caring role for them, but also that education role. So it does meet that criteria. What I am super intrigued about, based off of my past knowledge of yourself, is your lower score inside of realistic. I know we talked a little bit about how you enjoy working with Legos, for example, but you don't want to do that for a job. So I get that. I see why your realistic is low. I was a little surprised just because of what your past job was and how much you enjoyed, why that's lower. I know there's a bit of consideration to just current ability, and maybe that has a bit of influx in it. But if there ever does rise a little higher, other jobs that I can potentially think could be of interest could be again, more education bound. So whether it's teaching anthropology, there you go. That's another SI, very similar to counseling. It's a bit of that detail approach, but it has, while it's not listed in the Holland of having that realistic on there, there's a bit of that inside of that as well. So those are just what I have on my paper. I want to do one last check-in on how you feel about those results. And again, this is just for consideration. We can bounce off this for new ideas for future interest and even pursuing your doctoral degree.